didn't announce it, so I apologize for those who got here before that. I didn't communicate it to the entire committee, but obviously I did communicate to the committee members who aren't here yet because they're going to be here at 1:30. Obviously, rigorous schedule. We're all very busy, and council session rolled over this morning. So, 5 minutes at ease, but we'll get going at 1:30. Councilmember, my apologies for not getting across the other side of the... Colleagues are here and ready to move forward. This is the Housing and Community Investment, or what the hell is this? Housing and Community Development Committee?
This Housing Committee.
Housing Committee, that's it?
That's it.
I'll get that
More.
before
Just do all the other stuff, that's all.
Yeah.
Do it.
Chaired by Councilmember Cedillo.
Yeah, thank you. Okay,
Mr. Chair, would you like to start with item 1?
sure.
Item 1 is a HCID verbal update relative to the department's loan portfolio and residual receipts.
Well, let's hear from them. And item 2 is the same subject matter, right?
It's a HCD and CEO reports regarding a agreement with David Paul Rosen Associates for analysis on the residual receipts.
Great.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Good afternoon. Helmi Hisserick, Assistant General Manager at the Housing and Community Investment Department. And I just wanted to give a little bit of background on our asset management program and then turn the conversation over to Doug Swager, who will speak specifically to residual receipts. In about 2013, we inherited the CRA portfolio of loans that expanded the city's loan portfolio and the residual receipts portfolio from the $1.2 billion that we had at HCID to about $1.8 billion. So at that time, we recognized that our loan portfolio was one of the largest affordable housing loan portfolios in the country, by far and away the largest in California. And we thought that we needed to treat it very seriously as an asset of the department. We restructured the department and put Doug in charge of asset management and asked him to not only integrate the CRA portfolio into our loan portfolio, but to think forward about how we can improve asset management and residual receipts collections in the department. I would just like to say we have within the department what we call Reinventing Asset Management, a process going on where we're really thinking about how do we change the way we work with the loan portfolio, how do we treat it as an asset. And Doug has done that by both speeding up the collections of residual receipts, which he'll speak about, but also we are in the process of planning about how to automate residual receipts collection, how to make it a user-friendly system for our borrowers. So, you know, today, if you have a loan with the City of Los Angeles, we send you a bill. We do everything sort of manually, and we calculate every single loan or residual receipts transaction manually. Our goal is that developers can upload their annual reports. The OCR will read the data. The system will automatically calculate the loan, and that borrowers will be able to go online, see the status of their loan, and know whether or not their payments are current. So it's what we view as a 3 to 5 year improvement process, something that we're undertaking in the process improvement of the loan portfolio, but I think that I wanted to share that with you because I think the report that Doug's going to give you is going to tell you a little bit about where we've been for the last 2 years and give some context for where we hope to go.
Okay, thanks you, Helmi. Council members, Doug Swager with the Housing Community Investment Department. The committee asked, I guess last week or a couple weeks ago, that we give an update on the residual receipts portfolio. So I prepared a real brief document that describes the size of the portfolio, of the overall loan portfolio, the size of the residual receipts portfolio, and describes on the back of it the different loan types that we have. So the department's affordable housing loan portfolio, and we've got just over 5,300 loans. It's valued at about $1.9 billion in loan receivables, and it's made up of loans that have been provided by the department, a variety of loans over decades, right? As long as the department's been around, we've been providing loans that help develop new affordable housing, provide housing rehabilitation loans for lower and moderate income homeowners, provide loans to apartment building owners to make repairs, provide loans for first-time home buyers. So there's just a variety of loans that over the years that have evolved, and they make up this large loan portfolio. And so we service all those, and we've been able to divide all those variety of programs into a number of loan types that are described back here. And they range from sort of deferred repayment loans where you don't have to pay it until the end of the term, loans that are for service payback or are forgivable. So if you provide the service over time, the loan's forgiven. Regular interest-bearing loans, just like a mortgage. These residual receipts loans we're talking about, and even equity sharing loans that we provide for first-time home buyers, where once you sell the house, you repay your loan plus a percentage of the appreciation in the property. So large variety. A significant part of that is this residual receipts portfolio. And this residual receipts portfolio, a residual receipts loan, it's a primary loan type that's used for affordable housing development, I'd say throughout the country. And it is the primary type of loan that we use for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And it essentially is you provide the loan to the developer, the mission-driven developer. They use the money to build the projects, the housing developments, and the loan is repaid over, right now it's a 55-year period from what they call residual receipts. And the residual receipt is essentially you take all the income from the project, all the rents, maybe the washing machines, what have you, and then you subtract out all the allowable expenditures. And if there's money left after that, then it's shared, is what they call, that money's called a residual, and it's shared. A portion of it typically goes to the project owner, and the rest of it is shared amongst all the, what we call soft lenders. So we would be considered a soft lender because we don't know how much we're going to get every year. Only if there's money available at the end of the year do we get a repayment of it. And that's residual receipt loan. And they're calculated at the end of the year. The property owners have their audited financial statements done, and then we review those and we compare it to what's in the loan agreement, what's in our policies, and determine, okay, you've got $10,000 extra this year. In this case, say we get 30% of it. So we get $3,000. Another lender like the state of California or the county would get $3,000 or $4,000, just depending on what they've got in there, and the owner of the property would get the remaining balance. So this portfolio, the residual receipts, we've got right now 761 of those types of loans. And it grew significantly when we took over the CRA portfolio, so it almost doubled in size. Of the $1.9 billion in value of the whole portfolio, about 1.5 of that is residual receipts loans. So it's, these are the loans the trust fund gives, and it's the primary work that we do. And it does generate revenue for us. So stepping back, the loan portfolio as a whole in the fiscal year 2014-15 generated over $40 million in income to the department. And primarily that money is federal money, so it's reported back to HUD, and then we get to use again to develop more affordable housing. So the whole portfolio generated $40 million. Of that, about 15 of it in fiscal year 2014-15 was from these residual receipts. So Helmy, referred to, we took a look at this back in 2013 when we sort of restructured. And at that time, it's a real, right now it's a real, there's a lot of work that goes into reviewing and determining the residual receipts on these loans. And at that time, the department was organized as such that the same people were doing the annual reviews were also, trying to collect the funds and working with the borrowers. And the department had been historically, behind, a couple years, 2, 3, 4 years in collections on some of these. At the same time, you had the CRA sort of went out of business, and it took a couple years from the time they stopped working for the loans to really transfer to us. When they did transfer, the CRA portfolio was kind of behind in their collections too. So one of the first things we did was we sort of reorganized it so that the analytical part, the determination of the residual receipts, we brought on a bunch of temporary accountants to kind of catch up to do that work. And we made that a function out of our accounting department or division as opposed to sort of this asset management division. So part of the reorganization is through our accounting department, we now, do this analysis, and that's all they do is this analysis every year. So we've been able to catch up not only on our portfolio, but also the CRA portfolio. And you'll see that sort of as a spike on this table in year 2014-15. There's a big spike there. That spike, it's there as a result of catching up as well as the new CRA portfolio. So we've now sort of caught up. We've been caught up, for about a year or so. And now that we are caught up, we should be able to begin projecting how much we expect to get every year and sort of budgeting for that. That's sort of the hope and the intent of this. So you'll see in this year, we're not all the way through this year, and we're already sort of at the highest we were in previous years. So once we're done this year, I think this will be the first year we've actually been caught up. I'd say, we should be able to see a trend after 2 to 3 years is kind of the goal. So with that, I think that's a good overview, and I'll take questions.
Questions?
So, what is I guess, now that we'll have more tools in place to sort of better forecast what the receipts are, how will those appropriations effectively be made by the department? I mean, my assumption is that it would feed back into more projects, but can you explain a little bit about how that process will work out and where the council sort of gets involved there?
Well, I guess what I'll say is the primary source, the primary source of the original funding, I think, is federal dollars. Typically CDBG money for the older loans, home funds, and a variety of other sources. When we collect income, either through this residual receipt collection or if a loan's paid off, the first thing we have to do is report that to HUD. And then HUD makes us actually draw that money down and use it before we use any new money. So I would say that, it'll come back for the council's consideration, I think, as we come back with recommendations on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund projects and through our budget for the different types of programs that we operate.
So the part that sort of, I guess, is the accounting question that I have is, at what point has that money lost its federal flavor? We've satisfied all of the constraints because there were federal dollars. Presumably there's a point in the cycle of a project that the money, I would think, would be sort of free and clear for us to prioritize differently. Or am I mistaken? Once it's because it was born a federal dollar in a project, it remains a federal dollar for the life of the cycle of that project?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. And so, but the thinking is then that it would go back into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund? I mean, within that, can we begin to prioritize projects in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund? For example, let's say we want to put an emphasis on temporary or permanent supportive housing and that sort of thing within the fund. Would we have that flexibility to prioritize the money that feeds the fund?
As we report the funding back to HUD, as it comes back as program income, it basically becomes sort of just part of the pot. So if it's CDBG and it comes back, it goes back into CDBG, and we go through the consolidated plan process to allocate it. So through that process, I would say, yes, we could. The home money comes back and it goes into our home allocation from HUD. Right now, we typically use the home allocation for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So we could prioritize the expenditure of that along with the grant funds that we get and we receive every year in the same way we do it.
Yeah, and I would add a little bit that, first of all, the council and the mayor do set the priorities for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and can always shape the priorities of how we expend funds. So this money, as Doug says, comes into a pot, and the conversation about how we spend it is absolutely the policy objective of the council.
Yeah.
The types of funds, the CRA funds, are somewhat more flexible than the federal funds. The federal funds tend to be much more inflexible and do go back in as home program income and are reported. The CRA funds are reported as well. They go into a separate pot, but it all is used as part of the trust fund. Some fewer strings are attached to the program income that we get from the CRA loan portfolio.
Yeah, no, I don't want to sort of confuse the point. I know that's not new money. It's just, I think there's a tremendous opportunity now with the accounting that you've got in place to better forecast what's going to come in. So ideally, that gives us more opportunity to program those dollars with a little bit more certainty. And maybe it puts a finer point on what it is that we're trying to accomplish. So to that end, I think this is great news, provided that we stay caught up.
Some of the other issue that arises that is a policy discussion is the decisions we make with respect to negotiating the payoffs and the repayments. So as we come forward to discuss recapitalizations, one of the biggest changes to the residual receipts is really payoffs, loan payoffs. And to the extent we don't request payoffs, we continue to extend that debt, we tend to have lower income into the residual receipts portfolio than if we actually increase our payoffs. It's always a delicate balance in these discussions because our primary objective is the extension of affordability.
So, can you be more creative? I was asking, I look at 1.9 billion, and I know that today we have a discussion around $100 million for emergency housing and housing. Are there ways that you could be more creative and figure out how we could, you're at a point, you've put things in order, now we're going to be able to define a trend and a projection, but once you do that, can you position us so that we could access the money quicker, sell the loans, create some other types of swaps or trades so that we can access capital sooner and then get that into motion?
I think that is possible, and we're to sort of very preliminary stages of looking at that, considering that with folks that could actually help us to do it. I think your point is well taken. That as we get the house in order, that's the kind of stuff we can do. That's precisely the kind of stuff we can do.
6 months, a year?
I'm thinking a 2 to 3 year for me, but.
Well, I think the urgency is clear, and to the extent you want to direct us to go back and see if there's opportunities for finding resources, we'd be happy to come back with a report out on that.
Right. The housing piece of our current challenge is going to be longer term, and so, you know, if we can project out, if you say it's 2 years for us to get a real handle and begin to go look at markets to try to access this.
Yes. We're very interested in pursuing that kind of thinking.
Good. Thank you. And you then do a report back to us on this?
Sure.
Another question? Yeah, so that's item 1 and 2, right?
Was that one?
It's item 1. Item number 2 is actually a separate contract.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
So item 2 is, are we ready? Okay. It's very much related to this. It is to bring in a consulting firm to help us analyze our policies and procedures around these residual receipts, billing and calculations, to bring us more in line with sort of how other lenders are doing it, the industry norms. We found that the CRA did it a little bit differently than we did it, and so you've got borrowers out there that have sort of different expectations. It's the next sort of step in this improvement process, I think.
Is that enough money?
It is to get this done. And it's not, there's a lot more we want to do, and it will take more money. There's a lot. This is the very first step.
I anticipate that we'll come back and seek additional larger contract for a broader scope of work.
Right, that's what I'm thinking about,
Yeah.
because you don't want to do this on the cheap. I mean,
This is just an initial analysis that will help us get through some negotiations that we need that are in the near term, but our bigger picture, we do plan to come back with a request for additional funding.
and I'm assuming that this is a question of capacity, that we're buying this consulting service so that we
That's right.
can get this done a little quicker.
That's right.
No questions.
Thank you.
I'll have to call a vote on that, council members, committee members. John White, City Clerk. Item 2, Cedillo. Fuentes.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Harris Dawson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Okay, number 3. Can we do 3 and 4 on consent?
Mr. Chair, I'll just briefly read them into the record. Item 3 is the CO report relative to HACLA payment in lieu of tax funding. Item 4 is the HCID report regarding HOPWA service providers.
Can we do both those on consent?
Very well.
And again, for those, I'll have to require a voice vote. Cedillo.
Aye.
Fuentes.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Harris Dawson.
Aye.
Thank you, sirs.
That takes us to item 5, Mr. Chair. Would you like to go to item 5?
Yes, I do.
Item 5 is a motion, O'Farrell-Weezer, relative to establishing a nexus between discretionary land use entitlements and affordable housing.
Okay. This is the value capture item, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So, public comment first, or is there somebody making a presentation? Where are you? Who's coming up? There you are.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Just go ahead and start.
Yep.
Okay. Well,
Waiting with bated breath.
all right. So my name is Matt Gillespie. I'm with the City Planning Department. I work in our Citywide Policy Unit, mostly on housing issues. So this idea, shorthanded, called value capture. It's actually a term that can mean a lot of things, but that's kind of the term that's stuck to this idea. This is an idea that came out of our housing element, part of our general plan that we did about 2 years ago. This really is the citywide policy document on housing. We work with a number of departments, and we work with a lot of people in this room in developing that. And it's a place kind of where we put some new ideas into the policy document about what can we do with this affordable housing crisis. And obviously with the lack of money and the lack of CRA, a lot of people are looking at planning and land use and what can we do with affordable housing through our land use powers. And so we're thinking of incentives. What incentives can we give for affordable housing? And one of the things we realize is density bonus really is the main game in town in terms of providing some incentives, allow you to build a little higher in exchange for some affordable housing, and that's very popular in the city. But we realize there's a whole class of projects, thousands of units every year that need more than 35% density. That ask for the density bonus is limited to 35% increases in density or height, floor area. Some projects, for whatever reason, a lot of good reasons, ask for zone changes, ask for general plan amendments, ask for development agreements. These are kind of the major projects around town where the zoning maybe hasn't caught up.
Matt, just quickly, the limitation, is that because of state statute?
The limitation on
35%?
That is.
Okay,
right.
is it SB 1818?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. It actually, the state law, I believe, says that states can kind of go beyond that and create a program beyond that, but we don't have anything beyond that. So that's kind of what this, in a way, it's a little different the way it's being conceptualized. But the idea is, projects asking for more than 35%, asking for doubling their density or tripling their density today don't have any affordable housing requirements put on them by statute, by law. Sometimes these things are negotiated, these things are volunteered, but there's no sort of standard when we are, in effect, doubling your density on a project. There's nothing in the law today that would allow us to get any kind of affordable housing or other community benefits. And so we took a look around. Other cities have actually gone down this path. Chicago.
I know
yes.
I'm interrupting you, and I apologize. But how does this fare when you've put height restrictions? Would this overwhelm that, or would the height restrictions that have been brought in still maintain?
Yeah. So when people ask for zone change, for example, or a general plan amendment, every case is different. Sometimes people don't ask for additional height. They just want the density, or sometimes people need floor area. Sometimes they do need the height. Oftentimes it all goes together. You want height, density, and FAR, and a bigger project in general. But every project, I think, is different. I think, part of, at least, I mean, this is what we're going to explore in the report. I think there are a lot of ways you could look at this issue. It's a lot to explore. It's kind of a new, innovative, I would say, idea. Some cities appear to be picking it up. New York is actually going down this route. Mayor de Blasio's kind of idea is when we upzone you, when you ask for a zone change to go upzone, there's going to be kind of an affordable housing requirement. What I think we're conceptualizing in California and LA would be a little different, just the mechanics, but the idea I think is similar. It's a very complicated issue. I think we'd want to look very closely at it and what projects would trigger this requirement. How does the requirement get applied? What percentage of affordable are we going to ask for in exchange for what? A lot of questions that I think a report back would allow us to delve into and be able to explore a little deeper. But cities like Boston, Chicago, Honolulu, this is very common in Canadian and European cities as well, this idea of planning, land use, being connected to affordable housing increases.
Phoenix uses?
I'm not sure about Phoenix. I don't know about Phoenix. I'm not sure.
Think of. I mean, I like those urban, dense areas, but our city's a little different than some of the cities you mentioned. So we need some apples to apple comparisons.
Okay.
So I'd suggest that, and then I'd suggest, and I'm interested because I want to see how it plays off on the other zoning restrictions, the historical or ours is the CASP, right? Or when community puts in a height restriction, how do these interface?
Yeah, that's great. I want to be clear. I should have mentioned.
Kind of, and the specifics. Like in my district, I'll just ask you, look into our CASP and then see what would happen here because it's going to be outside. We have Echo Park and Sunset. There's height restrictions on one side of the street. How would that interface with each other?
Yeah. Let me be clear on this point that the way at least we're thinking about it now would not be a sort of almost automatic, quid pro quo in a way, or this much for this much affordable housing for this much height. It would be still processed through their existing entitlement requests, discretionary actions for a zone change, for example, that comes to City Council or general plan amendment that comes. And I believe that those projects would be looked at completely on their merits of whether we want to approve any height increases there. This would just be part of the requirement. If you are granted a zone change because the city believes it's warranted, you meet the findings, this would sort of be tacked on. But it would not be something where we would be compelled to give zone changes and height increases if we felt it was not warranted.
So help me understand again sort of the limitation, the 35% that's currently, I mean, why couldn't we just effectively, well, I guess we would be able to do it now, which is why the report's going to come back and say, here's how you would do it as principles. But so if a project wanted it to exceed 35%, as you mentioned, in sort of density, do we need to wait for the state law to change to give us more than that, or we can sort of go ahead and do it on our own? Do we have the full discretion?
I believe we do have discretion to create a program that would kind of be tacked on in part of the density bonus program that would exceed 35%. The The issue with that is that would, in effect, density bonuses are set by right. The rules of when you can approve and deny one are very, very actually set by the state, and it's actually very difficult to deny a density bonus project. We approve almost all of them, I believe. There's very few circumstances you could deny one. So if you were to link a program with density bonus and say we're going to go up to 50 or 60, we're going to pick a number, it becomes almost, we're granting those 50% almost by right.
Right.
Versus keeping them where they are today in a different discretionary procedure allows you to have more discretion and look at each project individually and say, this is a good project, this is a bad project. Whereas if you tie it to density bonus, it becomes, it's almost by right, de facto.
Got it. I imagine, your framework that you all will come up with would be more like guidelines for a case-by-case basis, or will you go so far as to look at mobility, for example? Because I think this would be obviously a real good complement to the idea of the mobility plan, because that would help you understand where you'd have more public transit, for example, and maybe 50% or 60% or whatever it is additional bonus would make sense given sort of what's nearby. How is that framework going to be built? Is it just going to be principles, or is it going to be really specific to arterial sort of design and mobility?
Yeah.
Or have you all thought about that
Well,
yet?
part of this is we haven't, given it tons of thought, but I believe yes. Claire Bowen. I might.
Well, Claire Bowen, City Planning Department. I think I just want to maybe clarify that we're not looking to try to create a simple pathway forward for a lot of developers to suddenly come in and ask for additional density. I think what we're recognizing, I think Matt did a lot of research identifying that there are projects today that are coming through and asking for these things. And it's like we feel like we're leaving things on the table. So again, we're not trying to create a new pathway, but these things are already happening,
right,
and we're missing an opportunity. So when those projects happen, certainly we try to look for.
No, and I don't want to alarm anybody that there's going to be an overabundance now of density bonus. I just think of sort of, as Mr. Chairman Cedillo was talking about, I think of Van Nuys Boulevard as a corridor where we know that from a mobility perspective, there is intention and resources designated for the growth of serving the transportation needs there. I don't want to wait until the light rail or the bus route gets built, because I know it's going to come. So I want to take full advantage and bring more affordable housing on that corridor and start building up, because it just makes sense versus leaving things on the table, not getting the affordability, and waiting until the transportation part gets caught up with this policy. And so to me, it's a real opportunity to help further the argument for the investment by Metro, for example, if I can sort of show this corridor is right for it, because our planning is going to unlock the potential where we know there's need, and thereby brings us more affordable units. So I'm eager to try to figure out how to get this up and running, because I think this will then beget more transportation options, in my case at least.
Yeah. Well, and what I'm hearing is that you'd like us to explore what it might be like to almost, because again, the way I'm conceptualizing it, these are divorced from where, there's not a sort of by right if you're on a corridor in this. This is,
and nor should there be.
But we could. The density bonus program does do that today in some sense. It gives you the ability to ask for a higher floor area ratio if you're within 1,500 feet of transit. I think part of what we want to do is look at our density bonus program comprehensively and say, are there tweaks? Does that still make sense? Are there any modifications that are needed to be able to make sure we take advantage of our transit infrastructure and get growth where we want it and not have growth where we don't want it? But I think we can fold that into what would an amendment around these ideas around the density program would look like, and then what would it look like outside of the density program?
I don't want to constrain the thinking. It was more curiosity to understand what it is that you're thinking and how do you sort of frame all of this, because I think, for example, the managed pipeline process, it's very, very much tied to sort of where transportation is, and I think that makes an awful lot of sense. So it was more curiosity than it was a direction, because I want you all to come back and say, here's our best sort of thinking on it, and then we can chime in at that point. But this is, very, very exciting, largely because I think it will help shape, it'll unlock the potential that land use has in our area so much more than we currently are constrained by. So this is very good stuff.
I'll give just because I had my intern run this number this morning. I want to give it to you. We think we have about 6,000 units that are asking for zone changes and general plan amendments.
Wow.
In the pipeline just this year, filed 2015. if you were to pick a number and say 15 or 20% of those being affordable, you're already at 1,000 affordable units this year, which basically matches our entire affordable housing production of all of our money and land use combined. There's
And that's
appears
going to be left
potential
on the
there.
table because we're not here yet.
It's being left on
But
the
the
table.
good news is that we're going to get there. That's great. Thank you.
Are we,
Oh, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman.
yes, sir.
Just a quick
No,
question. You
absolutely.
mentioned,
We're not in a
I
hurry.
know you're going to be doing the study, but you referenced some other jurisdictions that are doing something similar. Anybody here on the West Coast? Anybody here in California?
Not.
Or where?
We
Or
haven't
where?
done an exhaustive search,
Sure, no, I
but I know Boston, Chicago, Vancouver, Honolulu.
Okay.
are my 4 cities that have something very similar to this.
Along those lines, I think either you or in this discussion, it seemed to imply that we're trying to codify what we're not sure may be some practices going on at the moment, or that at least there's no prohibitions at the moment, and it's not clear, so that this is part of what we're going to get in the report back.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure.
Are there any prohibitions to do these things now, explicit?
Well, it's not codified, so there's no requirement today for a developer to be, have to provide this. It sometimes is negotiated, volunteered, but we've been advised. I mean, our city attorneys have said, those are difficult to enforce, a volunteered or a negotiated, and they've advised that if you want to do something like this, it should be codified in the law. But it's on a volunteer basis today, or negotiated.
Okay. Oh, yeah. While you're here, why don't you talk to us about Palmer and the direction of that?
Sure. So.
What your thoughts are?
Right. So Palmer versus Los Angeles was the court case where the city of Los Angeles essentially lost the ability to do inclusionary, which is to require affordable housing in a particular area. Sorry.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, is this related to one of the agenda items here today?
To this item?
It's related.
The case he's talking about?
Yes, absolutely. Right.
It is
very
related,
important
yeah.
for us to understand the nexus between these two, and what will be the, if there will be potential impact, or if we're rubbing up against it, as is also the San Jose case.
Yeah, it's actually a good question because it raises the legal concerns of can you do this in the city, and because we did lose a court case, Palmer, that basically forbid us from requiring affordable housing in a particular area or citywide, just on all projects. On every project, have to do 10 or 20% affordable housing. That was being done in the city in some areas. That was taken away when we lost that court case. We believe that this idea falls outside of that and would be legal. We've got to make sure we talk to our attorneys. We have done some discussions with our attorneys because there's a carve-out from that says when a developer is getting something, when a developer is coming to the city and asking for zoning relief or zoning modifications, then it's not the same. Where you have the right to not ask for that and just do by right, and then we can't require affordable housing. But if you're coming to the city asking for higher building or density, that we believe there's a carve-out in that lawsuit, in the law that lawsuit was based on, Costa-Hawkins, that would allow us the legal opportunity, but we'll certainly be working closely with our lawyers.
And then San Jose is consistent with that?
So San Jose came after and said you can do inclusionary on for sale, but we're still not allowed to do inclusionary on rental until there's a fix in Sacramento.
In terms of an exchange from a benefit from the city to the developer?
Well, San Jose just has a policy, every project over 10 units has to do 15% affordable housing for sale. And so that's been legitimized, and so that option is available on for sale, but there's no ability to have a requirement on all rental projects today in the state of California.
It's going to be a great report back.
Thank you. We look forward to it.
Okay. Anybody else? David, are you guys here to speak? Nope. Any other questions, comments? Public comment? Public comment? Okay, Mr. Steve Diaz, please join us. Aaron Jimenez, Central City Association, and Brady Collins from Kiwa Act, LA. 3 seats. Thank you, guys. Mr. Diaz.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Steve Diaz, and I am with the Los Angeles Community Action Network, who's a member of the Renters Day Coalition as well. We're here today to support this policy and feel that this policy could actually complement some of the policies that are being proposed by Councilmember Cedillo in reaching our 100,000 unit goal as we continue to try to make Los Angeles a better city and a great place to continue to live in. Affordable housing is needed, and this tool will continue to ensure, by passing this tool in the study, you'll be moving forward towards ensuring that tools like this can be implemented in the city of Los Angeles. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Aaron Jimenez. I'm here on behalf of the Central City Association. CCA appreciates the opportunity to comment on this motion and asks this committee to keep a few principles in mind while considering it. First, the city's land use and zoning is outdated. Many areas have not been reviewed in decades. This means that many projects asking the city for discretionary action are simply responding to outdated zoning. Second, we need to remember that Recode LA is in process and the idea of value capture is being discussed in conjunction with the new zones. Third, we encourage the city to review and improve existing incentive-based tools like the density bonus ordinance. We can learn from real-life examples about what works and what needs to be improved. Finally, we believe the city should focus on incentives instead of mandates to increase housing production. CCA is ready to work with the council on innovative approaches. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir.
Hi, my name is Brady Collins, and I work for the Koreatown Immigrant Workers Alliance, and I'm a member of the Alliance for Community Transit Los Angeles, or ACT LA, and I'm here because I also support Councilmember O'Farrell's motion on value capture. In Koreatown, we've witnessed large-scale development for decades, and yet very little of this investment has benefited the current residents, who are largely low-income immigrants. We believe that value capture is needed and should be used in combination with other strategies to prevent displacement. Now, ACT LA is a coalition of 26 organizations across the city and hundreds of residents who want to see more equitable and sustainable development in low-income communities. The massive investment in public transportation in Los Angeles and the accompanying transit-oriented development threatens to displace the very people that rely on public transportation to live and work. As a result, as the city and taxpayers invest billions of dollars in new transit, Metro is losing ridership and people are losing their homes. ACT LA believes that through value capture and other policies, we can achieve equitable TOD that creates more affordable housing, quality jobs, and sustainable communities for everyone. Thank you.
Joe Donlin, Rabia Sen, and Laura Raymond.
Good afternoon. My name is Joe Donlin. I'm with Strategic Actions for a Just Economy, and here today in support of Mr. O'Farrell and Mr. Wisar's motion for value capture. And we feel, as was just reported by Mr. Glesney, that the opportunity and the is here right now as major projects are moving forward. We've seen in our own experience as part of the Unidad Coalition success in having affordable units being included just recently in a project in CD14 on the Blue Line. We've got 15% affordable housing on site there at very low and extremely low income levels, and that's something that we would like to see in all projects moving forward at stronger levels. And we all know the crisis that we're in terms of homelessness, in terms of housing affordability, and the time is absolutely now to get all of the policy tools in place that we can utilize to address these crises. Thank you.
You are?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laura Raymond. I'm the campaign director of Alliance for Community Transit Los Angeles. We're 26 community groups representing hundreds of residents throughout the city, from Venice to Pacoima, South Central LA to Boyle Heights. We've come together to outline a different vision for Los Angeles and the current way development's going in the city. In particularly, we see the massive investment in public transportation right now to the tune of $40 billion. And 60% of new housing being built right now is by metro rail stations. But the housing that's going in is not for core transit riders, 70% of whom make less than $25,000 a year. The new housing being built is overwhelmingly luxury housing and market rate housing. And so we want to work with the city on moving policies like this forward. We thank O'Farrell's office for their leadership on this. And we want to work with the city council on moving policies like this forward to ensure that we have all the tools we need to address the present housing crisis. So I wanted to thank everyone today, and I look forward to working with you.
I called Rabea Sen, Esperanza Community Housing Corp. She in the area? Did she leave? Okay. James Porter. Okay, sir. Thank you. I have Doug Smith and then Ruth Sarnoff.
Good afternoon. My name is Doug Smith. I'm an attorney at Public Counsel. Our community development project works with community-based organizations to advance equitable planning and development and increase access to affordable housing. I want to join my colleagues from ACT LA and Renters Day to strongly support this process to explore and implement value capture policies. As you're well aware, we're in the midst of a very severe affordable housing crisis. At the same time, we're making unprecedented investments in transit infrastructure, and we're planning for denser neighborhoods and more much-needed housing. So we have this opportunity to make sure that the growth and investment creates opportunities for all Angelenos. We can make sure that the increased housing stock also corresponds to a net gain of affordable housing in our communities. But this requires that we be intentional and deliberate in making equity a cornerstone of the planning process. And value capture is a really crucial and necessary tool to unlock that potential. So we urge you to support this motion and hope that, as these strategies are developed and considered, that, it's done in partnership with those community-based organizations and residents that have been at the cutting edge of these ideas. Thank you.
Ruth Sarnoff. I too, just hearing about this proposal this morning, so I think it sounds pretty good for this particular venue. I just brought some material with me today because the density bonus law has been on the books for a long time. I think it's SB 1818, something like that. And the result has been enormous overbuilding. I'll speak again later, but I brought this as a replica of the 90 projects and indicating where they are, and they're all moving out in a very short period of time. There are 21,328 residential units in this, and they're pretty much all large scale. They're all big condos, big boutique hotel, that kind of thing, and it's all coming through in about a 3 or 4 year period. It's exemplary of why we have an overbuild here of very expensive housing.
Thank you. Okay. We're going to hold the item and get a report back.
What we're going to do, we're going to
hold the item and we'll get the report back when they come back to the schedule.
Takes us to item number 6, motion Cedillo Harris Dawson, instructing the Housing Department to report on preservation efforts for expiring HUD subsidized mortgages and project-based Section 8 contracts.
Okay.
Good afternoon. We welcome the opportunity to do a written report back on our preservation program, and we also are prepared today to provide a short verbal presentation if that's so desired. So briefly on our preservation program, in 2009, the City of Los Angeles, through the Los Angeles Housing Department, now HCID, was awarded $700,000 by the MacArthur grant to begin analyzing preservation of affordable housing. Franklin Campos, who's my colleague here today, was the lead staff person on the grant and has been our lead for the preservation program and the development of it within the department for some time. Since that initial grant, HCID has grown in its understanding of preservation in both the needs of what the types of properties that what type of preservation we can be doing and what are the needs, what the data says are the potential properties that are at risk of converting from affordable housing to market rate, as well as what the best preservation strategies are. In brief, the best preservation strategies are both education and outreach to landlords and tenants, particularly with respect to the HUD Section 8 properties, and financing support. Recently, our focus has been on figuring out how to create an ongoing permanent preservation program within the department. And recently, Councilmember Cedillo recommended that $9.1 million from the excess bond proceeds in the redevelopment agency within the CD1 area be dedicated to preservation. And so we've been working closely. In fact, there is a joint report going to the Bond Oversight Committee tomorrow with EWDD and HCID recommending how the funds will be spent and what we'll be doing. And it really has been a shot in the arm for the department because for the first time we're talking about how to create a real staffing plan and momentum around preservation. We will be coming back in the 15-16 budget with a recommendation for a citywide expansion of the preservation program with the hope that we can actually continue to expand the work that we're going to be starting in the CD1 area. And to be clear, in the Council District 1, we'll be focusing in Pico Union 1, what are known as redevelopment project areas. So we're limited to those areas. It's Pico Union 1, Pico Union 2, Adelante East Side, which Wilshire Center, Koreatown, and Westlake. My colleague Franklin Campos has some information specifically around the HUD preservation program. We've had some success. About half of the HUD projects that we've been working with have had extensions of their contract beyond 1 year.
Good afternoon, committee members. Franklin Campos, Housing Planning and Economic Analyst. As Helmi mentioned, I'm tasked with the tracking, also monitoring, and also outreach component of the departments, the non-financial piece and the policy piece. So before we come back with a detailed report, I just want to give you highlights in terms of the numbers, where things are, and what we have done with regards to the motion. The department estimates that approximately 13,500 units of affordable housing are at risk of losing their rental subsidies and affordability restrictions in the next 5 years, actually to 2020. That's approximately 20% of the restricted affordable housing portfolio. Of the expiring properties, 68% are primarily federally assisted. So we're talking about the HUD subsidized portfolio. 18% is restricted by HCLA. That would include also CRA, other old loans, MPP loans, other earthquake loans that had restrictions. And the rest are financed or restricted by the state and also by the housing authority. So approximately of the properties that are expiring just alone in the next year, there's approximately 5,783 units that are HUD subsidized. So the bulk is happening within the next year. And the reason for the high number is that a lot of these properties that we're talking about, they're usually on annual renewals. There's an option to renew for 5 years, up to 20 years. That can be done just by the owner requesting for that contract term, but also it could also be as a result of a preservation transaction, a recapitalization of a project, possibly an acquisition of a building to rehab it, and then probably going to the state for tax credits. So, like I said, the vast majority of those units are actually HUD subsidized as well. In terms of in the last 14-15 fiscal year, in terms of the HUD subsidized portfolio, as Helmi was mentioning, approximately 2,700 units, that's 32 properties, renew their HUD subsidized contracts for 5 to 20 years. So basically that has been done through the different types of outreach, the different types of initiatives, but also by owners working with HUD, but also through some of the properties that we were able to finance. A lot of the efforts also have come through as a result of the different initiatives and also the outreach and education component in working with the owners, but also working with the tenants to make sure that everybody understands what their options and responsibilities are. like I said, we've been focusing on carrying out all these activities over the last year. In terms of the outreach and education, the outreach and education has always been an initiative of the program. That's to conduct outreach and education to owners, but also to tenants. Just over the last year, we outreached to approximately 1,100 families living in 41 properties of city finance, but also HUD-assisted housing. As a result, we were able to stop some illegal evictions, also getting owners to renew contracts, as well as making sure that properties that were not in compliance, in terms of city finance, that we brought them into compliance as well. And in terms of the outreach contract, we're in the process of renewing our contract through the end of 2016 to keep on doing the outreach to these types of properties. Also, we've been working with different owner and management companies that oversee these risk properties, restricted properties. Just over the last year, we had a series of trainings for management companies and owners where we had about 300 people actually have attended those series, about 5 trainings by the department. And that's to discuss the different requirements, primarily for the city restricted units. But some of those also overlap with the HUD portfolio. So we've been able to accomplish basically a lot of successes. I mean, in terms of when we talk about at risk, when we see those high numbers, it doesn't mean that everything is just going to terminate, but it's constantly being at risk. One of the challenges is working with the owners, because this is, especially for the HUD portfolio, it's an owner-driven. The owner has to know what their options are, but also this is where we come in, and the department works with the owners to basically try to understand what those options are, and working with HUD and the different partners. So basically, it doesn't mean that they're all going to terminate, but just to give you a perspective, over the last year, I believe we haven't had a HUD-assisted property that has terminated. What's different is I think it's because of the market.
Compared to last year.
Compared to last year, yes. I mean, and so in the years prior to that, I think that we had more properties terminating. But what I believe is that in the next year, maybe 2 years, as the real estate market improves, you're going to start seeing that at-risk level really going up. So now we're really going to keep tracking these properties, because there's going to be more of a risk when it comes to them. So they do continue to be at risk. So if you have any questions.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm, like my colleagues, very interested in this. I think in the 9th District, we identified about 1,000 units that are going to be expiring over the next 2 or 3 years. That's, it's 1,000 units of housing with families, kids, that could be negatively impacted. What's the process? I mean, we talk about them expiring. Obviously, they don't just start evicting automatically. What's the timing for when the expiration occurs? What are the legal sort of steps that can be taken or are taken? Does it drag on for a year? Is it a 6-month process? I mean, what's the transition?
Yeah. So
possibilities?
It depends on the term of the restrictions. In particular, for the HUD portfolio, most of these properties actually were 20-year contracts. As the years went by, almost all of them are actually now on annual renewals. So there's requirements that basically the requirements are for the owners to provide HUD, the city, with a notification as to a year prior to the expiration, letting us know what's gonna happen with the project, and if they're gonna be renewing, let's say, the contract, or if they're gonna be terminating the contract. So that provides us a year, but actually the owner has 4 months prior to the expiration. That's the final notice that they give to HUD what their plans are. So during that time frame, we were tracking what's happening with the properties. We're also tracking under a state requirement, which is also a 1-year notification that provides us with more information as to who lives in these units. but we do keep track of them, and we also work with different organizations, but also with HUD, to basically really take a look at who is for reals as to who's going to be terminating. But also, there's also other safety nets in place, especially for the HUD properties, which for those tenants that qualify, let's say when there's a termination, they will receive what is called an enhanced voucher. So there's that safety net. It doesn't mean that they'll all get it, but they're going to have to qualify. But there's a lot of risks that are involved. So the department does work from the beginning to the end in terms of tracking it. And the issue is that it's a cycle. So you have to prioritize, and you have to make sure that you keep track of those notices and those properties that have said that they might be terminated.
So are we going to be doing this review in-house, or are you going to be farming this out for a consulting group to do the study for us? Is this something we can do, or what's?
Well, we do a lot of this in-house, and I would go back to the discussion of outreach and education. We do contract for outreach and education, and the importance of that in terms of what you asked previously, the question about process, is that particularly in HUD contracts, tenants have rights and owners have also got rights and responsibilities in terms of notification. So one of the things that happens that we do both in-house in terms of tracking and also with organizations that we hire to assist in the information provision of information to owners is ensuring that the owners are following all the procedures necessary to notify folks if in fact they're getting out of they want to exit their contract. And at the same time working with the tenant, so the tenants are aware of what their rights are with respect to being able to stay in the property or being able to get an enhanced voucher with HUD and what their requirements are for maintaining affordability. So it's a big information exchange, and we do a lot of that through firms that we hire. We've in the past worked with Coalition for Economic Survival, Public Counsel, and CHPC, which is an organization that has helped on the financing. The financing work, we do a lot of it in-house. It's sort of wrapped into what our finance officers do. So the other side of this is really when we get engaged in a refinancing discussion. On the HUD contract side, our goal is to enable property owners to easily make the decision to want to stay in a HUD contract. And we do that by working with HUD so that our underwriting on any sources that we might put into the project are sort of consistent with the HUD process, as well as looking for opportunities to enable owners to and in many cases, new owners to acquire properties that they would then stabilize over the long term. So we do a lot of the financing in-house, although we have hired in the past CHPC, California Housing Partnership Corporation, that has come in and done an analysis of sort of what we think the cost of purchasing affordability would be. The properties that are CRA are quite different. If it's a CRA went out in the past and purchased affordability, basically bought affordability in a bunch of properties. When those expire, there isn't a sort of federal government oversight. It's just they could convert to market immediately. The things that might prevent immediate displacement would be whether or not the rent stabilization ordinance kicks in, so depending upon the age of the property and whether or not it's a rent stabilized property might matter, and what the loan agreement says. So if the loan agreement has provisions that don't enable you to just displace a tenant. But there are cases where we will see tenant displacement or basically what we'll see is rapidly rising rents in formerly CRA properties. And so in those, what we've been looking at as how do we go in and negotiate to purchase affordability, extend the affordability in those properties, basically make it a financially rational transaction for an owner to continue to have income on their property, but also enable on a tenant to remain in an affordable unit. And that's usually a financial analysis that we're doing.
You had mentioned that there were a lot of 1 year, year to year to year. shouldn't we or can we put together some plan where we extend that? That's got to be incredible stress on tenants. Maybe Walter also was the last guy who extended that for 25 years, right? But that, I just dated myself. That, it seems that we should think of a policy for the city that maybe looks at least at a minimum of trying in those conditions where we can get at least 5 years, if not 10, 15.
Yeah, I would just say, ultimately this is a HUD's relationship with the property owner, and we have limited role to play. But then in the creation of a preservation team within the department, that is the kind of thing we want to pursue, is really come up with strategies to incentivize longer-term contracts, because that takes the stress out of the system and, creates more permanent, affordable housing within the city.
Takes it off the tenants and the
Yeah.
owners. We're going to public comment? Okay, public comment. Joel Montaño, Velvet King, Sandra Tunstall, and Osvaldo Valdez, and Ruth, in that order. So let's start with Joel, Velvet, and Sandra.
Good afternoon, Joe Montano with the Coalition for Economic Survival. We fully support the tenant outreach plan for these expiring HUD buildings. As opposed to other expiring contracts, HUD tenants have protections that include the right to remain in their units even if the owner prepays the HUD mortgage or opts out of the project-based Section 8 contract. Tenants have the right to apply for a Section 8 enhanced voucher, and the owner is required to accept them. But if tenants are not aware of their rights, they may be needlessly displaced. This is why a strong tenant outreach plan is important. It is an inexpensive investment that will pay huge dividends and save this housing. Over the last 3 decades, CES has facilitated tenant participation to identify property concerns, ensure needed repairs get addressed, improve the level of communication between residents and management, prevent the loss of low-income units, and inform tenants about their rights and options. Over this period, CES has partnered with the Housing Department and HUD to preserve affordable housing and provide tenant education and outreach services to prevent displacement. CES has received numerous HUD tenant outreach grants, most recently the HUD Tenant Resource Network program that lasted for about 3 years, and we did outreach and organizing assistance to tenants, 39 at-risk properties throughout LA County, over 2,000 units. Thank you.
Velvet King.
Good afternoon. I'm Velvet King, member of Coalition for Economic Survival, and I live in one of the HUD buildings located at 961 West 43rd Street. Oh, I'm sorry. Put it that close. Messed me up. Called Premier Apartment, which is located in Council District 9. I am here to show support for the city preservation efforts of HUD buildings through outreach and education, because I've benefited from the work CES had did at our building to educate me and my rights, working together to improve the conditions and services by establishing better communication with the management. Also, preservation was a priority. One major example occurred in February 2014 when all residents were served 60-day notice stating that the HUD contract would be terminated and residents would have to pay. Wow. Let me stop and keep going.
Thank you. Sandra?
Bear with me, I just had an operation. Okay, my name is Sandra Tunstall. I am a member of CES. I too live in a HUD building, 2535 South Longwood.
Ma'am,
Castle Longwood.
Close to the microphone.
Castle Longwood Apartments. I am here in support of the motion that is occurring due to the funding issues. Because of the education of CES provided for me, the education, I had the privilege to speak with representatives at the Los Angeles Housing Department to address the poor habitability of broken appliances such as heaters, refrigerators, and stoves. With the help and the improvement of the communication with the management company who was ignoring the voices of the residents, having outreach plan, having with outreach planning will be important to have, because I'm sure that other tenants are dealing with situations such as I have.
Thank you. Bertha Alvarez. And Oswaldo Valdez.
Good afternoon. My name is Bertha Alvarez. I live at 1819 South Gramercy, District Number 10. I've been working with CES for 5 years. I've got involved with them because through them they showed me more education that I have my rights. For example, our building was sold knowing that we have a voucher because I was a former HUD tenant. Now I have my exempt voucher. The owner went in there in March, giving us notices that we had to leave the premises. They also have not provided us, letting us even know who the owner is. Every time we try to reach out to them, we have to go to our councilman's office or we reach out to CES. Only thing that I want to say is thank them for giving them for us having that support. If it wasn't for that organization and our councilman, some of us would have been displaced by now.
Thank you. Oswaldo.
Hi, good afternoon, Councilman. I want to say that I grew up and my mother currently resides in the building that Bertha's in. And I have seen, my mother's now 77 years old. I'm really speaking on her behalf. I actually moved out of the city, but I still come down and I see everything. And, we're out of District 10. And we really couldn't have done anything to help my mother without the help of CES, because the owner came in and actually tried to unlawfully evict several tenants, taking full advantage of the language barriers, which our building is very diverse. There's Hispanic Americans, Black Americans, African Americans, right from Africa, Asian Americans, and whoever was here is here. Whoever can be here is here today. There's a lot to be said, though.
Good. Finally, Ruth.
I was just kind of connecting the dots between some of the things that people were saying, and it seems to me like this is an opportunity to look at adding solar water heaters as a bonus to buildings, that because the owners usually pay the water, I think, in the HUD buildings. Another thought that came to me was that it's an opportunity also to involve small business contractors who are not getting a lot of the work. The developers come in and probably do a lot of this stuff, but a lot of it could be done by local contractors, and get some local jobs in the picture, and look at being able to go inside and look at the quality of your Section 8 housing and maybe offer some collective way for people to come together and do some renovation, retrofitting, but it's done group-wise, so it's less expensive for landlords, and maybe you can get a longer contract that way.
Thank you. I have a motion to approve the motion on preservation. Send this to council.
So move. Cedillo.
Aye.
Fuentes.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Harris Dawson. Thank you, sirs.
That concludes the agenda.
Item 7.
Item 7.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were on. Forgive me. Item 7.
That's right.
HCID report relative to the department's monitoring of affordable housing units developed and pursuant to the city's density bonus ordinance.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Robert Manford, and I'm with the Environmental and Land Use section of HCID. To my right is Ms. Britannia Murillo, who is with the Occupancy Monitoring section. About a year and a half ago, in May of 2014, you instructed us to provide you with feedback regarding information about the total number of affordable housing units that have been constructed within the city pursuant to SB 1818. And since 2008, after the adoption of the density bonus ordinance. The item before you is just a response to that. So just to provide you a brief overview, if you look at page 3 of the transmittal, it provides you with a table, table 1, that shows that there has been a total of 4,668 units, with the largest number of units located in Council District 1 and the least number of 12 located in Council District 3. Table 2 on the next page, which is page 4, also provides you with the total number of RSO units. That's the RSO units that has been demolished and replaced with SB 1818 affordable housing units. A total of 1,147 units have been demolished, and the replacement of 2,150 units has been made. That also shows a net increase of about 1,003. The rest of the transmittal information provides you with information regarding household income determination and also mechanism for compliance and monitoring. This time would be available if you have any specific questions regarding the transmittal and the information.
Colleagues?
So one of the sort of conclusions here in the report is that monitoring SB 1818 units is difficult to do. Why?
So my name is Britannia Murillo again. I'm on the Occupancy Monitoring Group, and so we're responsible for overseeing the compliance of the affordable housing covenants. So it's not just for the land use covenants that are executed through the density bonus ordinance, but also the trust fund units, bond units, et cetera. We also inherited the CRA portfolio. So the challenge with land use, the monitoring of land use covenants is really about leverage. So with projects where we have loans, there's the leverage that we have to say, well, there's this loan, it could potentially become due and payable if you're out of compliance. With land use, there isn't always that leverage. There's no loan that created the affordable housing units. Something else that was mentioned in the transmittal was the majority of the units that we reference here are also a part of the affordable housing portfolio, so they were also trust fund projects. So we're not really addressing the compliance challenges there because for the most part they're mission-driven organizations and there aren't compliance challenges there. It's really with those that were not originally intended to be set up for the managing of these affordable units. So we've worked with the city attorney on compliance issues. So we actually have a 95% compliance rate overall for the entire portfolio. So we're really talking about the exceptions. You know, how is it that you motivate? How is it that you really compel compliance when you're stuck?
So, I mean, unlike other affordable housing stock, it seems that the compliance of these, I mean, granted, it's only 5% that's had a compliance. Mm-hmm. Is that relatively better than the other affordable units that we've got out there that we monitor covenants and that sort of thing?
Actually, for the land use, it's a little bit better. I was talking about the entire portfolio. But so to answer your question, no, it's actually, it's on par. It's okay. In the range.
One other problem has also been lack of resources, including staff. All other cities charge fees. We don't, so very soon the fee schedule will be coming to you for your consideration as well, for cost recovery.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a follow-up question to my colleague, Mr. Fuentes. So he asked about the difficulty in monitoring, and your answer was leverage. Which I assume I understand that you need leverage to get people to comply. I didn't understand how leverage is related to monitoring.
Well, not specifically on the challenges on monitoring. It's just when you deal with a non-compliant situation, how do you compel people to fix it? That was what I was addressing.
Right. So you feel like the monitoring is not the issue, it's the compliance.
When you have a situation where you are not receiving a response, that's the challenge. We work with the city attorney writes correspondence and says, there's this contract, you need to work with us and become compliant.
Right, so I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
But your ability to keep track, you feel, is 100%.
With a 95% compliance rate, I think it's strong.
Okay.
Do I answer your question?
No. Sorry. I'm just trying to get a sense, and again, pardon me because I'm new to this. Do you feel like there's information out there where you don't know what the status of the unit is, or do you feel like you're able to keep track of everything? It's just this 5%. And I'm asking because if you're not keeping track of all of it, the 5% number is not really the number. It's something bigger than that, right? But if you feel like we know what's happening with 100% of the units, so our monitoring ability is impeccable. If you feel that way, then we can have confidence in the 5% number.
So I'll echo the comment of my colleague is we've identified some resource challenges, and we'll be coming forward with transmittal that recommends fees on how we can do the work better. Does that answer your question?
And there's always going to be a margin of error.
Mr. Price? Nope. You want to note and file this and then send this to council?
You have a speaker's card?
Of course we do have. Ruth, come on up. On the matter.
Well, sorry. Ruth Sarnoff. I ran into some interesting things on the internet last night, and I haven't had time to totally absorb it, but the density bonus law has been around at least since around 2006. And I ran into an article dated January 9th, 2015, Density Bonus Law, City Hall's Hidden Nightmare. And it kind of explains exactly what's going and how basically developers can pretty much get what they want, and they get as much as 35 to 58%, kind of like to enlarge their project way beyond whatever was allowed by whatever city codes or city planning had laid out for them. Obviously, my time is up. So
Yes. You're welcome to share the article with our staff here.
it's on your website.
you.
It's on a website at least of the cities. And I also noted that the same motion has gone through the city council for any number of times around the same thing on the density.
So let's note and file and send this to council.
I'll take a voice vote for that, council members. Cedillo.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Harris Dawson.
Yes.
Thank you, sirs.
Okay, Jonathan Ayon. Not present?
General public comment?
Yes, general public comment. Jonathan Ayon. Ruth, did you want to, Joe Donlin, and I have Ruth Sarnoff. Joe Donlin, and?
Yeah, he left.
Final words, Ruth.
Okay. All right. I put this together because this it was all from the Downtown News.
Ma'am, on the
It was
microphone,
May
please.
18th.
Use the microphone, please, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My name is Ruth Sarnoff. I put together this map and some coding to show where things are, what things are, where there's parking, underground parking on projects, what the traffic potential for problems is, to show, break it down by the live-work units. And this is a sort of a thing in progress, so don't look. Anyway, there are basically, and I'll try to get this in the record before my time's out here. I think I gave you the residential units. There are 39 structures less than 20 stories. Now, some of those are sort of high rises, you know, like the City Hall. But I call the high rises the towers over 20. And 39 structures less than 20 stories and 29 high-rise towers. There's almost 1 million, or maybe it's it's 1 million, almost 2 million square feet of retail and restaurant space going into it. And we have a lot of empty units in the 6 southern counties here, almost 500,000, which is about the same as the homeless population in those same 6 counties. And there's a lot of stuff out there that sort of will guide, I think, the council in some of the direction they need to take. There's Caltrans is a big slumlord. I don't know how else to put it. They have a lot of empty houses and they don't take care of their property well. And they just got dinged for about $10 million in a case that was lead paint. And the worst thing that I read about it was the inspectors were out 2 times, saw the peeling paint, and never turned in reports that closed them down or gave them anything. And that was a year. The woman was pregnant at the time, and she gave birth to a severely deformed baby who will require feeding and care for the whole rest of its life. And yes, and Wells Fargo is also a big land banker and landowner and has lots of tenants. And so, you're going to have to look at both sides of it. You're going to have to look at the growth side, try to get the affordable housing, and make sure you know the difference between affordable housing and low-income housing and very low-income housing and housing for homeless people. Because the homeless, if you don't handle the homeless that are there now, they're pretty. They've waited a long time.
Okay. Thank you, Ruth.
And you're very patient. I like your format here. You're much kinder than some other formats. And I have a handout for the
motion to adjourn.
I have a copy of something I wrote. It should go to all the council members. I got the CD numbers on them. You figure it out.
I think I'm going to eat it before the coffee's out.
If you want to borrow